Hi everybody and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Nicola Buckby and I'm the Managing Director here at CH4B, and I'm joined today by the lovely Karen Holden from a city law firm. So thanks Karen, thanks for your time this afternoon, it's really appreciated.
No problem, nice to be here.
Perfect. So to start off today, I just wanted to cover off the topic for today's webinar. So today we're going to be looking at employment law, the changes that employers need to give consideration to, given the times and the challenges that we've all faced over the last sort of 12 to 18 months now. So without further ado, I will just cover off today's agenda. So first of all, I'll do an introduction to you all to Karen, who joins us today. Karen is our legal expert and we work very, very closely with a city law firm supporting our members. The topic, as I say, there's quite a few areas of consideration to give around employment law and the changes that employers need to know that have come into force and that are continuously changing. So it's important to ensure that we're all up to date with the legislation and ensure that as business owners we are protecting ourselves as an employer, but also by doing what's right by the staff members, especially with furlough, etc., coming to an end, and how that's going to impact the businesses. We will then open up the session to a member Q&A. So for any of the attendees today, along the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A section. Please do feel free to pop any questions in there as we go through, and then we will be more than happy to answer those with the lovely Karen towards the end of today's session. We'll then just recap the webinar takeaways and we'll cover off the areas and the structure for anybody that does want to find out a little bit more information and would like to arrange their member freebie, which I will cover off as we go through. So without further ado, I would just like to introduce you to Karen. I'll give you a little bit of a background on Karen, her experience and her expertise that she brings through as a partner working alongside us here at CH4B. So initially Karen established the business, a city law firm, from scratch 12 years ago, and now has a legal 500 City of London practice. She has a variety of clients, from a range of sector startups to businesses and clients that turn over and sell over £30 million upwards. And this is in addition to her individual high net worth and entrepreneurial client base that need guidance and advice throughout. Karen understands personally the benefits, the drawbacks and the hardships of running a business, what this brings, as well as being best placed to help businesses navigate through the changes and the challenging landscapes. Face-to-face investment rounds are also an area in which Karen can support businesses and feels in control of the transactions and the support that she delivers to clients, which is key every day in the service that Karen provides. So without further ado, Karen, if you're happy, I would like to hand over to you and just cover off today's topic and give a little bit more substance with regards to today's description.
Okay, so let me share my screen, and hello to everybody. Thank you for joining. Perfect. So hopefully this is all clear on the screen. I'm going to try not to overpower people because there's a lot involved in being an employer, and as we all probably know at the moment, it's evolving. Used to be year by year, now and then it was month by month, now it's day by day. So there's a lot of things. So please, this is correct as of the 5th of August, and I'm carrying that because tomorrow the government can change everything. So, you know, I'm trying to cover off things. So at the moment, we are being told by the government, go back to the workplace, get back into the office. So what does that actually look like right now? So whilst there's a lot of guidance, it's very hard for an employer to understand, well, what's mandatory, what's guidance? What should I therefore make contractual and mandatory in my workplace versus guidance? So I think you are going to have to look on the website on a regular basis. But by September, the whole idea is that everybody's off furlough, they're back to work. So you're going to have to look at a risk assessment. How are you going to make the workplace safe? You're going to have your own guidance on face coverings. Perhaps consider flexible working and ongoing remote working for some, if not all. If you can't restructure, or if there has been any difficulties, you might sadly have to consider redundancies. We're then going to have vaccine requirements. Now, when I drafted this 2 days ago, and you'll see in my slides, you cannot force people to take a vaccine to return to work. The government's already now contemplating changing that as of next week. So again, I'm probably talking and it's changing as we're talking now. And then you've got, when do you test? Do you have to test? What kind of track and trace do you need to have? When do staff have to go into isolation? Most of you, like me, probably don't have a full functioning human resources department. So how on earth are you going to keep on top of all this? I'm hoping that this isn't just giving you some legal updates, but some practical guidance to try and keep it manageable. So the first thing is a risk assessment. You do have a duty to keep your staff safe. Now, obviously, that's very self-explanatory on a construction site and in a warehouse, but even now it's moving into offices and retail, things that you never really thought were a hazardous area. But with obviously things going the way they are, we need to take responsibility. So the first thing that I would suggest is you have a staff handbook that guides exactly what staff should and shouldn't do. Now, not only does that give a transparent platform for your staff to work on and gives everybody guidance, but ultimately I'm talking to as an employer, it protects you. You then have cause for gross misconduct if they're not following the rules, but you also have a defence if something goes wrong. And I know it's not nice to speak like that, but ultimately you have to protect yourself as a business. So you can look at still social distancing in desks and workstations. You can stagger times. You could perhaps look at the way different floors are used. Obviously, deep cleaning, the use of hand sanitizers, leaving the windows open. Whatever you feel is needed to be done, make sure your policies reflect that. And you know what, practically from any point of view that can ever discuss throughout this, talk to your staff. Everyone will have their own view, so ultimately it's going to come to you, your policies and guidance. But if there's one or two with concerns, having someone to talk to in an open forum saves so much headaches. But ultimately, train people, give people sufficient notice, make sure it's really clear, because we don't want to Boris. You can do this, but you could do this. Don't do that, but you could do this. Don't be that. Be an employer to protect yourself. Face coverings. Now, the government is making it clear that this is going to be on a case-by-case basis. So we all know, like airlines and TfL are maintaining that. It is entirely up to you now what you do. It's very difficult when you talk to people. Do they take their masks off? Don't they? Do they want you to wear it? Don't they? So I think giving flexibility to staff to say you're comfortable for them to wear it, but if they want to take it off, they can. But it's more about when they're meeting clients or staff around them, you're going to have to decide what you think is mandatory versus guidance, set that in the policies, but also have some flexibility in protocol. It is very difficult when you meet people. I mean, we all did this, the handshake. Now, do you wear masks? Don't you? Just outline so there's no confusion, but ultimately it's going to be your decision. Obviously, people have had to work remotely quite extensively through lockdown. You know, some employers have been very gracious in giving flexible working, especially for parents. We've all had that dreaded homeschooling moment. Now, the guidance is very much go back to work, but is that possible for everybody? Maybe people are still nervous traveling, maybe still have issues with schools and nurseries. Again, ultimately, it's your decision, but it's very important that you understand they have the right to apply for it, and you have to treat it in a reasonable manner. Now, ultimately, it's your decision. It's at your discretion, and you could say no to everything, but document what you've done, why you're doing it, and have a very reasonable, fair process in place. Look at the advantages versus disadvantages. Have a meeting to discuss it with them. And you do need to give them the grounds for appeal if you're saying no. Now, by doing this, you're not facing any potential discrimination claims, but you must treat people fairly. Don't offer it for one and not the other without genuine reason. Is there other alternative roles they can do? You will need to have consideration for this, especially, for example, if someone's pregnant or disabled and very scared about COVID-19, could you put them in another role where perhaps they're not around people so much? If you are going to allow people to work remotely or have flexible working, again, make sure their contracts and policies are up to date, such as sitting in the right posture, who's going to be responsible for the equipment, who's going to insure it, making sure that the data is secured and not passed. What kind of expectations do you have them? Now, at the moment, you've got people working 9:30 to 5:30 in the office, but we all know when people are working at home, those lines become blurred. They could be working far more additional hours, which, yes, is an advantage to an employer. You also don't want them to burn out or have mental well-being issues. So again, give them some security, monitor their performance and talk to them, because ultimately it's got to be a two-way street. You'll get more out of them if you engage with them, but you also don't want them falling asleep and burning out. So, and who's going to manage them? How do they check in, for example, in the morning? Do you have regular touch-in and meetings? Just make it as easy and as clear for both of you as possible. Ultimately, come September, October, there are going to be restructuring of businesses, cash flow issues, and sadly, redundancies. Hopefully, you won't have to go through that. But if you do, start thinking about it now. To try and see if you can actually shuffle things. Maybe people will want to take reduced hours. Maybe they'll help you by job sharing. But if not, you need to start looking very carefully how to document a fair process. It's going to be difficult for those that are shielding, those that are parents and can't come into the office, versus those that are actually already in the office and performing. And you're going to have to be very careful that you don't discriminate, that you're very clear on who the pool for redundancy is, what the criteria is, and how you fairly selected them. So have a very transparent policy. We all know that this is going to happen, and we all know there's going to be appeals and potential issues in the future. So the more you document it, prepare it, and plan it, and go through it fairly, the more protected you are. And there's so many alternatives out there. And the more I speak to my clients, a lot of staff are willing to go and job share, maybe take jobs elsewhere until the business is back up and running. Perhaps even do salary sacrifices and bonus freezes, reducing overtime. Some people actually want to take early voluntary retirement. There's a lot of things you can do, so don't just jump straight into redundancy if you don't need to. Ultimately, protect yourself, clear documented process, robust procedures, communicate it to everyone transparently and fairly, and where possible, follow your policies to the letter. Now, as I've said, at the moment, the government said you cannot be forced to have a vaccine. Obviously, there's going to be difficulties. Perhaps your business needs people to travel, and that's less applicable to those with vaccines versus without. But you must be very careful not to treat people less favourably because they haven't had the vaccine. For example, if they've got a disability and they're scared or unable to do so, then that opens you up to a claim. So again, fair policy, transparent discussions. However, the government, as I said, to announce today, are now considering the employer's right to require employees to have a vaccine before they return to work. This is going to be a potentially contentious issue, from anti-vaxxers to younger people, to older people, to disabled, to those that are pregnant. There's going to be many issues. I have no idea how the government are going to resolve all of those, and hopefully it won't fall on us as employers to have to deal with that ourselves. So all I can impress on at the moment is it's not mandatory, you can't do it, but have considerations of how you want to see it going in the future. Now, testing, again, it is not mandatory. You do not have to test your employees to go into work. If you want to do this because they're public facing, or because you have 1,000 employees and you're scared of one getting it, all getting it, then you need to look at the policies and processes. You need to look at the contracts. You need to speak to people, and it needs to be very clear and documented. You're going to have concerns about confidentiality, sharing their personal data, who's going to pay for it, how does it work? So the more you discuss it, the more there's an open forum. That's very, very essential that you do that now. And track and trace. If you are going to have some, either whether it's technology, whether it's a manual system, you need to know who they're going to report it to, how you're going to enforce it. Are you going to have silos and bubbles? What's the process? Can they have a test result to come back in? Do they need to isolate? You don't want to get bogged down in so much detail case to case that it basically closes your business administration down. Think about it carefully, what you want, how it can work, who's going to run it, and document that and communicate it to everybody. Now, in 2021, as I've said, not just even COVID, but we have seen a lot of changes. Now, if you are taking overseas people that are moving into the UK, again, immigration rules have changed. Now, I've put them out here just so that you can see that. And if that does apply to you and you want more information, we could provide that to you. There have been raises to rates of statutory maternity and paternity, adoption and shared parental leave. So make sure you're up to date and whoever's doing your payroll has actually brought that to date. Statutory sick pay. Again, the rates have gone up, and you're also now going to have to consider who pays when people are isolating, if they get COVID or they're told to isolate, or can they work remotely at home. Again, the government guidance is that they can be at home working, or they can be off sick with or without sick pay under the statutory scheme. But you're going to need to decide what works for you in your business. Again, the IR35 rules have changed, but luckily it's for those with 50 plus employees or an annual turnover balance sheet below. You need 2 of these 3 for you to fall into this. So if it does impact on you, you'll need to look at it. But we were all scared it was going to apply to every single business. But if you are a larger company with 50 plus employees, you do need to bring yourself up. This is for self-employed, third-party subcontractors, de facto employees, and the government are quite hot on that at the moment. So just familiarise yourself with the new rules, look at the subcontractors agreements, your policies, and mainly it's going to be around the tax regimes. Health and safety has been extended, and it's not just for employees like it was previously, it's to anybody who now comes physically into your workplace, subcontractors, interns, everybody. So you need to make sure that you look after them, you carry out a risk assessment, and you're doing everything possible to enforce that. You've got to be very careful if everyone's fearful for coming into work for COVID or because of anything. You deal with it carefully, you document it to ensure that you protect yourself. Again, certain things were dealt with by Zoom and you could actually do things remotely. Now they actually want you to get back into doing face-to-face when it comes to work checks. So you have to compare the passports and the identification with the person face-to-face before you can sign off their right to work with you. There are changes coming. It's supposed to be this year, whether it's pushed back or not, but you cannot place women on maternity leave through the redundancy process. That's something that we know is about to change. So those that are pregnant or on adoption leave, and that will include surrogacy, you will need to look at your policies and you will need to consider the structure and how they're dealt with. We're not sure when that's coming in or what the rules are, but it is about. So I think the most important takeaway on these sort of things is you do need to keep involved in the government website and the rules and the changes. But ultimately, are your staff policies and contracts up to date? Have you thought about as much possible how you fit with the law and comply, but that's practical, that's workable? Then make it clear and transparent and digest that to your team, whether it's training, whether it's on an intranet forum. Make sure you've communicated it clearly to them. And then again, not mandatory, but what's something I highly recommend is you have a forum, whether it's a nominated person or whether it's a forum for them to sort of email you or ask questions for anyone's private concerns over anything. It'll just take away leaving it too late where somehow there's a grievance before you're even aware there's a problem. So that is pretty much a very quick whistle-stop tour. But obviously, if there's any specific concerns, I'd be very happy to address them. And as I've said, the main thing is you familiarising yourself with what's right for your business, your sector, and updating your documents. But if there are any questions, Nicola, I'm very happy to take any.
Perfect. Thanks, Karen. Let's just have a look on the Q&A. So there's a couple of questions that have come in. So the first one is around the dreaded ping, and it actually employers asking employees whether or do they have the right to request confirmation that they have received a ping or they have received a positive COVID test. Where do employers stand with regards to that? Are they able to request confirmation or proof that that is the case?
I mean, when you go off sick, your policies probably do say, look, if you're going to be off sick more than 3 days, we need a sick note, we need a GP's note, we know we need something. So it's absolutely the same as that. And again, yes, you can. And the way that you ask it, you just have to be very careful and you say, look, we're running a business, we're going to have to maintain this. Can we see this, and how does it apply? And, you're also going to have concerns because I've also heard employers saying, can I ask my employees to remove the app? I've had employees saying, can I remove the app? you've got to be very, very careful. So you as an employer, you follow the government guidance, and if you wish, but anything that's mandatory, you follow. So just keep referring back to that so that as it changes, you haven't put yourself in a position where you've said one thing and then it's changed. But absolutely, there is no concern of you asking them to see it. The other question then becomes, what if they have been pinged and they want to ignore it and they come into work? Do you want to take action against that as a potential gross misconduct? Do you want to make them have a test? There's going to be a whole raft of confusion as we do this. So I think there's never going to be a perfect answer. No one's ever going to know everything at every given stage, but all you can do is refer everything to the government website and make sure your policies are as clear as they can be at the time.
Yeah, and I think with so many changes as well, Karen, it's going to be difficult for businesses for a short period of time to navigate around that. So I think it very much comes from conversating with the members of staff, making sure that they feel safe and secure, and that expectation is rolled out within the business, and that everybody knows, I think, which is the key.
It's difficult because you've got to follow the rules. You want to protect your staff and look after them. But if all of a sudden all 1,000 staff are pinged and at home, what do you do? And I think we're all having media coverage at the moment about this right now. So I think you've got to take a pragmatic approach to this. And you're right, talk to people. And if it is possible to have silos, then, but the last thing you want is someone to take a week off and they haven't really been pinged. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with asking.
Okay, perfect. I've had a question that's come in from one of our attendees today, and it's more about sort of working from home. So the question is, what happens if an employer insists you work from home, but you now want to return to the office for your mental health as your home workspace is too small or confined?
So this again comes down to risk assessment. So if you deem that the workplace is safe and you should be able to go back in, then you should make that request to your employer. But it is going to depend, is your employer up and running, operational? Do they have that? So I know a lot of the banks in the city at the moment, they're only having certain days where they're open. And I've got friends personally who want to go back into the office. The employer's saying that they haven't been able to put a risk assessment wrapping around that so they can actually do that. Now, that means the employer has justified why they're not open fully and why they can't. So that will be upheld. But then you also, as an employer, have to be, if someone's flagging up there's wellbeing issues, then that should be flagging up to the employer, hang on, there's a concern here. I want to make sure this staff member's safe and happy. So you need to have a talk with them. The last thing you want is for them to end up issuing a claim or a grievance later. It's a balancing act. So they can defend it if they've carried out a risk assessment and deemed it not safe to return to work. The employer's justified it. But they are going to have to look after the health and well-being of their staff, which is just as important as the risk of them going in the office. So it's going to be a balance.
I think that then leads into another question, Karen, with regards to if the office is open. So it might be that businesses have gone back to the office, but they're actually picking and choosing which staff come back in and which staff are still working remotely. Where does sort of businesses stand with that?
So they would have to justify why they've done that, and it's not discriminatory. So if they're saying, look, I need you here because you're physically running the operations, I need you here to be here on the premises for this reason, you guys don't need to be here, you can log in remotely, that's a justifiable reason. But if there is any other cause of it, such as, you're going to be exposed potentially because you're an older person, well, that's not your choice to make, that's the employee's choice to make. So, or for example, if they don't want the pregnant woman travelling in to work and sitting in the office, are they doing that for her well-being and she agrees? Or is that, their decision on a discriminatory level? So the employer has to document it very carefully and have justifiable business means that are non-discriminatory for that. And again, talk to staff, make them understand why they're doing it. And it could be that some people are in the office that don't want to be in the office and some people want to return. And you can juggle it. I think employers, particularly at the moment, are petrified of opening dialogues because they're scared to death of upsetting people. I know when I'm now meeting people and someone's wearing a mask, do I invite them to take it off if they're comfortable, or is that going to make them feel worse or more or less uncomfortable? It's going to be engagement, and we're going to have to do it. We're just going to have to find our comfort zone to do it. But yes, ultimately, an employer is going to be in a a balancing exercise for everything.
Yeah, I think the other question comes down to, with regards to a lot of businesses with COVID, they've been forced into change, and a lot of business owners that we speak to are actually reassessing the cost for their business, and actually they're now identifying that some people can work from home and actually that they don't necessarily need an office premise. However, the employees that they might have took the job or worked in an environment where they were then in an office, and I think because the businesses, am I right in thinking, need to be quite careful with regards to sort of how their current employment contracts read with regards to their place of work. Ultimately, if their contract reads a place of work and the employer has then made a decision that they want to move everybody remotely, is it a case then that the employee has to sign a new employment contract? What are the sort of challenges there from employers' perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on the employment contract, because there's usually a boilerplate clause that the employer can make you work from anywhere in the UK, to be honest. And if that's in your contract, you have to work from anywhere. However, what we've kind of all overlooked because of unusual circumstances is ordinarily, if you want someone to work at home, there's very strict legislation. They have to provide the equipment. They have to actually physically go there, make sure that you're set up properly. They have to check your well-being on a regular basis. They need to know what you're doing and where there's a whole raft, but it's almost been on hold. And I don't know if we really understand the extent of whether that's going to change or not, because if you suddenly have 500 staff at home, I think the employer is going to be a bit shocked as to what they actually have to do to maintain that. And that expense could even be more than having leases. So I think we've all seen everybody thinking it's natural to now stay at home and work remotely. But you're right, people are working longer hours and don't want that. Well-being's being impacted. Training is not possible very easily remotely for a lot of industries. So I don't know. I mean, personally, I think in a year's time, we'll probably get back to our good and bad habits. But if they are restructuring and staff you're engaged with that, great. But yeah, they're going to have to look at the employment contracts, because I do think they've got quite a lot if they want to shift that way.
No, perfect. Thanks for that, Karen. I haven't got any other questions that have come in. So what I'll just do is just recap the key points from today's webinar that I've taken away. And I think those are actually looking at the statutory duty and the duty of care that an employer has on their employees, and that hasn't actually changed. So the importance of risk assessments, if more so than ever, to ensure that that environment is safe for their staff to come back to, and that they're within the guidance and the guidelines from the government. I think clear communication around what's mandatory is also key to ensure that people know what is mandatory versus maybe what is advised, as opposed to like you say, having that uncertainty and nobody really knowing what's going to happen. And I think that leads into the policies, and that it's vital for the policies to be clear, to protect the employers, but also to ensure that their employees know where that they stand, and actually that you're protecting yourself. Because I know that people that or employees that do suffer discrepancies in the workplace, and challenges that may come in if people or staff members feel that they have been treated unfairly, can be extremely costly for businesses and extremely damaging, both by reputation and also cost, which I think is key to consider. I think most importantly from everything today is to remove any confusion or uncertainty, because ultimately by doing so, you're going to eliminate those concerns from those staff members. You're going to eliminate concerns that you potentially may have as a business owner with regards to what you should and shouldn't be doing. And I think if you've got the communication there, you're speaking with clients, like you mentioned with the forum, and actually having a safe space where employees feel that they can raise their concerns privately, I think that that's key for a lot of businesses. And even something like a separate mailbox or a shared mailbox where you can actually encourage staff members to speak freely and raise those concerns. And the approachability, I think, is key. And I think for most businesses, emphasis, the key takeaways to ensure that you're protecting yourself and that you are prepared, whether it be to look at redundancies with furlough coming to an end, making sure that these risk assessments are in place, making sure that you've reviewed your contracts, etc. I think it's all relevant. And also what you've highlighted today, Karen, is that things are forever changing. So it's really important to make sure that you're up to date with the information on the government website, that you're compliant with the changes that we're seeing daily at the moment.
Absolutely. The one other thing that I didn't mention, actually, if people actually want to retain staff and they're nervous about that at the moment because the pool of talent is a little bit thin, it's also to consider employee benefits. So it's easier for someone to move for a job for a little bit more money than it is if they've got like private healthcare right now during the COVID, or they've got a really good pension scheme, or they've got options in the business. So as well as actually considering redundancies one way, actually maybe think about some of the benefits you could give to retain staff. That's something I'm seeing a lot more of as well at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely highlighted with the NHS and the time and the wait times on appointments, etc. And I think there is a lot of pressure on the NHS. There was historically anyway, but I think COVID's obviously heightened that and pushed the wait times back even further. So I think now people are looking more into private healthcare and looking as an employee to receive that as a benefit as part of their employment is obviously a lot more cost effective than if they were going to source that on their own. And I think for a business, it's not necessarily always that expensive to support and offer that as a benefit to employees. And I think now more than ever, with what we've seen, it's really important to ensure that you're looking after your health and your well-being, and if employers can help support that, then I think it's great. Perfect. Thanks for that then, Karen. Well, I know, as always, you're more than happy to arrange a consultation call with any of our members as part of their CH4B membership. So if any of our attendees joining us live or looking back on the recording would like to obviously find out a little bit more, maybe they've got some reservations about their business, what it is that they need to do, they might have some uncertainty with regards to where they stand with their policies and their employment contracts, then do reach out to myself. I'll be more than happy to arrange an introduction to Karen, and we can look to tee up that initial consultation. To find out more then, for anybody that is interested, please do feel free to visit the website. You can also email me personally and I'll be more than happy to arrange that introduction, and also you can contact myself or a member of the team at CH4B. So finally, I'd just like to say thank you for all the attendees for joining us today. Thank you, Karen, for covering off such a detailed webinar with some of the challenges that we're all facing at the moment, and giving and shedding some light as to where employers stand with furlough coming to an end, etc., and the challenges that we could all be faced with over the coming months. So thanks again for your time. For any of our members, as always, we are very much member led and we do rely on your feedback. So please do feel free to complete the questionnaire following today's session. So again, thanks, Karen. Thanks for your time. Thank you for all the attendees, and I look forward to speaking with you all and following up shortly.
Thank you. Take care. Hope to see you again soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.